All right, joining us now on the Blitz podcast edition here on the WBNY Sports Podcast Network, it's Cover1.net's Brad Kelly, who's a wide receiver scout there, as well as Breaking Football. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk some receivers.
Yeah, we've for the past couple of weeks we've been getting guests on for who are the Bills going to trade up for at quarterback? How's Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen? It's quarterback. Now wide receiver is another pretty big need, I would say, for the Bills. We were talking about it before the show. We got Kelvin Benjamin on the outside. I mean, there's only 1 year left on his deal, and who knows what's happening with Zay Jones? Deontay Thompson's no longer available. What do you think about just the current state of the Bills receiving corps?
Yeah, so kind of just what you mentioned, Kelvin Benjamin, and I like Kelvin Benjamin, but a lot of people are kind of a little bit lukewarm on him just because he leaves a lot to be desired, I think, for a lot of different players. And like you said, with 1 year and then drafting Zay Jones last year, I think he had a somewhat promising rookie season. There were some plays that he probably left out on the field, but as far as rookie wide receivers go, you're not supposed to expect too much, not quite like running back, whereas running back, you want more production year one. I don't think Zay Jones performed too badly. But with his situation and lacking maybe that really true number one, matchup proof receiver, that I don't think Kelvin Benjamin is quite there yet. Or if we ever get there, I don't think he's quite, like Antonio Brown or Julio Jones, where he's always matchup proof. Right. And then with the Zay Jones situation, I think they do need a target receiver probably in the first, on like day 2 of the draft.
Is Zay Jones a guy that you could see maybe transition into the slot if they draft another receiver, say from rounds 1 through 4, and they really like a guy on the outside? That we don't know if they're going to. Jordan Matthews is a free agent. He was battling injuries last year. I guess you could consider bringing him back, or a Jeremy Maclin, who they had interest last year in free agency, who had experience in the slot in Kansas City. Is Zay Jones a guy you could see transition on the inside if they draft a guy they like with speed on the outside?
I do, because I think Zay Jones, I think he's pretty crafty with his routes. He's pretty loose in the hips, I think, and he's explosive enough to be able to play in the slot. And nowadays, players get moved around so often that a guy can play in the slot, he can play kind of like on the wing or outside, and really just move him around to expose matchups. And I think players nowadays are always a little bit more versatile. And I think Zay Jones fits that mold.
Do you think the Bills are done adding receivers through free agency? Because obviously the draft is, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but, there are still some interesting names available. Obviously they missed out on, the big names, Allen Robinson. Obviously I don't think a Sammy Watkins return was bound to happen, but even Terrell Pryor is off the board now. He went to the Jets. Is a Maclin, or would you consider bringing back Jordan Matthews, or do you think this team needs to address the receiver based on youth?
I think that a guy like Jordan Matthews could still be viable. Matthews is a guy who has been productive in his career. He's not that old. He's only 25. He'll be 26 at the start of next season. But he's not so old that it's, if you sign him instead of taking a rookie, maybe there's only 3 years difference between a 25 and a 22-year-old. Right. I don't think he's old enough that it's going to hurt like the youth, wanting him to have youth at the position.
It seems like ever since the historic 2014 receiver class, expectations are extremely high for rookie receivers. That whole draft: Odell Beckham, Mike Evans, Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, and Benjamin all in the first round. You go to Jarvis Landry and even Jordan Matthews, Allen Robinson. That was a historic class, and they all just immediately impacted their teams in their rookie season. And it doesn't really seem like, though, throughout the history of the NFL, that's the case. Just go back to last year with Corey Davis, Mike Williams, John Ross, or even the year before, the Will Fullers of the world, Laquan Treadwell. Obviously Fuller had a pretty big year coming back last year, but outside of him, even I want to go back to 2015, Nelson Aguilar. He's finally coming into his own in his third year since they moved him into the slot. Are we expecting too much from rookie receivers now ever since that 2015 class? Just how hard is it to transition to the NFL?
I think that's fair to suggest. And even some guys who do perform well in their rookie or their second year, injuries kind of can catch up to a guy like Amari Cooper, or even, natural regression. So I think that expecting a lot out of a rookie receiver, I think, is a little bold. Maybe since that 2014 class, it's become more of an expectation. But generally speaking, going back to maybe like the 90s and early 2000s, it was always that third year breakout. You expected the first 2 years to progress, and then that third year is really when a receiver would come to their own. I think we've gone away from that a little bit because we've seen Odell Beckham, and Mike Evans and guys that come in their first season have 1,000 yards. But I think that throughout the grand scheme of things and like the whole scope, really those expectations for a rookie receiver should probably be a little bit more tempered as they progress year 2, year 3. I do want to see progression in year 2, and then year 3, I want to see them as like what they will become for the next 5-6 years.
What's the hardest and the most important thing for a receiver to adjust to from the college level to the NFL?
I think it's seeing all the different coverages and being able to win against the different coverages. So, and a lot of teams will have a scouting report on you. They'll scout more geared towards you because you're a starter in the NFL. And, they'll figure out ways to try to beat you and try to defend you. If you struggle to get off press coverage, you'll see a lot of press coverage. If you struggle to create separation in vertical cuts, they'll force you underneath and try to have to win vertical. So I think it's having to win against all different types of leverage, all different types of coverage. And guys who, maybe if they never saw that much press in college, or if they, whatever the case may be, that they have to adjust to beating all different types of coverage. And then, obviously I think the athletes are going to be a little bit bigger. They're going to be a little bit better. Guys who, can win against a 5'10" corner in college, maybe they can't win against a 6-foot corner in the NFL who plays the same, level of technique. So it's an obvious transition, but I think most of it is learning how to beat different coverages and leverage.
Well, let's go into this 2018 NFL draft class. You have the likes of Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk in the top of the class. Go a little down, you got Cortland Sutton, DJ Moore, Deshaun Hamilton. You've watched quite a lot of these receivers in the draft. What's your overall opinion of this class compared to, previous years?
I think this class lacks the high-end, true number one receiver as far as their can't-miss traits go. I don't think there's a DeAndre Hopkins or Julio Jones or Antonio Brown in this class. But what this class does offer is incredible depth when you go down to the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. I think in this class, I'm going to end up with like 15, 16 second and third round grades
right.
for receivers because it's just so deep. And so many guys offer so much different things. Like you have a guy like Auden Tate, and then you can have a guy like Kiki Kuti who's like 5'8", 5'9", 185. And they're so different players. And then there's, all different types of guys in between. And guys with different potential, different abilities. And I think in this class particularly, there's a lot of guys who have already found their niche. They found their way that they can win. A guy like James Washington is very good at winning deep. A guy like DJ Chark has great speed, and we know they're going to win. And then there's other guys who know they're going to win, like Deshaun Hamilton is a crafty, experienced route runner, and he's going to win, in the slot by running good routes. So I think it's kind of like there's a lot of depth, and there's a lot of guys who are going to have their role immediately carved out and try to win and progress from there.
Who's the best receiver in this class, and where do you see them going in the first round? Calvin Ridley's a guy I've watched a lot, just mainly because he's on Alabama and he's in the spotlight a lot. Same with Christian Kirk at Texas A&M. Who is your preferred top receiver in this class? And hypothetically, say the Bills don't trade up for a quarterback, or if they do, it's for, say a Lamar Jackson, so it's only a few spots and they don't have to give up their second first-round pick, and the Bills are looking for a receiver at the bottom of the first round. Or one of these top guys going to be available? Who's the best one, and how early do you see them going in round one?
I have a different take as far as who I think the top receiver in the class is.
Okay.
I think the best receiver in the class is Dante Pettis from Washington.
Okay.
He's a versatile piece. I think he's a very explosive athlete. He's a little undersized as far as his weight goes. He's over 6 feet tall, but he only weighs 186 pounds. So he's a little thin framed. I think his overall game is the best because he runs, in my opinion, probably the second best routes in the class behind Deshaun Hamilton. He's very, very loose in the hips. He's very explosive. Even if you go back to his days running high school track and field, his long jump was 24 foot 7 inches. He was 8th in the country in the long jump. That same year, Adoree Jackson was 4th in the country in long jump. So realistically, we're talking about a guy who has the same explosiveness as Adoree Jackson playing receiver. I think he's great in his vertical cuts. I think he's great in his ability to sink his hips. Versatile piece, can move outside, can move inside, and he offers you a ton in the punt return game. He had 9 punt return touchdowns in college, the all-time NCAA record, better than Deshaun Jackson, better than Adoree Jackson, better than Deion Sanders, Peter Warrick, whoever you want to say. He has more punt return touchdowns than they do. So I think he's an all-around piece for you, movable piece. And I don't think he's going to be had in the first round. I think he's going to be taken maybe in the late second round or the third round. As far as guys who I think will go in the first round, I am a big fan of Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley probably doesn't fall the top 16. I think a team like Baltimore at pick 16, if he's there, will definitely take him. And then I'm a big fan of DJ Moore as well. Happy that he was at 6 feet at the combine. He's just a guy who's a dog. He kind of reminds me of Anquan Bolden in the way he attacks the football.
Okay.
and he's a little bit younger. He's 2 years younger than Calvin Ridley. So he's a guy who he's not as refined as a receiver yet as Calvin Ridley. And Ridley is a guy who might be able to come in as a rookie and produce for you, whereas DJ Moore's kind of a little bit more of that projection.
Is Ridley at 12 too rich for your taste? There's some reports, too, that the Bills like Mason Rudolph. A scout was asking a lot about him from the Bills, apparently, according to the media. I just saw it on Twitter the other day that, they were talking about Rudolph, too, as an option. If the Bills really, if the Giants decide on a guy at 2 and, Brandon Beane said to the media today, like, they're not going to move up in the top 5, if they're not certain the guy they want's going to be there. Is maybe taking the route of a receiver in the top 10, is that maybe too much? And then preferring maybe a Mason Rudolph at 22. Is Ridley at 12 too high? I mean, would you consider trading back at that point if you really like Ridley?
I think that 12 is a little too high for any of the receivers in this class.
Okay.
I would be comfortable taking one. Is it pick 22 that they have as well?
Yeah, 22.
I would be very comfortable taking one at 22, whether that is Dante Pettis, Calvin Ridley, or DJ Moore. I would like that for them because I think all of those guys are different than what they have already. They're different than Kelvin Benjamin, and in that sense, they'll be able to complement Kelvin Benjamin. I think all three of those guys, Ridley, Moore, and Pettis, are guys who can play on the outside. They can play in the slot. They're all right around 6 feet, so they have decent length, but they're small enough and they're all quick enough, and I think they all run good enough routes that they could be a slot receiver and an outside receiver and kind of be that chess piece to move around the offense. I'd pick 22. If either of those three players are available, I'd be very comfortable for the Bills to take them.
Okay. The Bills could use some speed at receiver too, obviously. You look at what their strong suits are at receiver, and it's more based on size and with Calvin Benjamin and Zay Jones. And then they lost Deontay Thompson, who was their most explosive receiver, I would say, last year. They need some home run hitters. Are there any in this draft? Who do you think they could find maybe in the middle rounds that can really stretch a defense on the outside? Because that's something I think they're lacking, since Sammy Watkins has left Buffalo.
So as far as the Bills draft picks go, I mean, they have the most draft picks in the top 100. And like I was kind of touching on as far as how deep this class is, I'd be very comfortable if they waited for their third, fourth, and fifth pick, which is they have 2 in the 50s, and I think they pick 65. I think if they took a receiver in that range, I think that'd be a better range for them as far as getting better value. I would rather them take a receiver in the 3rd or the 4th round because I think the value would be better than if they took a receiver at pick 12 or pick 22. As much as I like those guys at the top, I like the depth more. So as far as guys in the middle rounds who could really stretch the field, a guy like Kiki Kuti out of Texas Tech is just a burner. And he's a little bit smaller. He's only about 5'9", but he can stretch the field from the slot as well as anyone I've ever evaluated. He's a guy his vertical breaks are incredible. He's in and out of them so fast. He's such a good ball carrier. He's so elusive. He kind of reminds me of Brandon Cooks in that sense. He kind of reminds me of Brandon Cooks as a player. Maybe not quite as fast. Kiki Kuti was more of a 4.4 guy, and Cooks was a low 4.3. Mm-hmm. But as far as the way he plays, his ball skills, his body control, his ability to win downfield despite being a little undersized, I think he's a guy who you can get in the 3rd round and can really, really be an electric piece for an offense.
What's your thoughts on DJ Chark from LSU? He's a guy that ran a sub 4.4 at the Combine. He played at LSU. Could be another guy that stretched the field. What's your thought on Chark?
I'm a fan of Chark, and I'm a fan of his intangibles even more so than him on the field. Okay. He's a guy who's gone through a lot as a young man. He went through a lot with his family and taking care of his family during his time at LSU. He's a guy he's good size, great size. He's 6'2", 7'8", so he's 6'3". He's 200 pounds, 199 at the Combine. Long arms, and then like you said, he was the only receiver to run sub 4.4. Or is one of 2 receivers to run sub 4.4 at the Combine, had the fastest 40, is an incredible vertical jump, 40 inches, incredible broad jump at 10'9". He's a guy who is an all-around athlete. Now,
he's not just someone that's like a Deshaun Jackson. He's someone that can make an impact all over the field, not just in the deep game.
I think that currently he's more of a guy. He's a great athlete, but he's more of a guy who's more of mostly a deep threat at this point in time. With his youth, he is a true junior coming out. He is a guy. I think he has sky-high potential. He can definitely develop into an all-around receiver. Now, currently his ball skills are lacking, but despite that, he's able to win at the line of scrimmage very well, and his get off and his hand usage and his releases, and that allows him to win deep because he's creating vertical separation from the line of scrimmage, and with his deep speed, with his 4.3 speed. So despite his lack of ball skills, he is so good at winning at those releases and his re-releases that he gets open vertically and can win vertically, and that's where he's going to win initially in the NFL. Now, as a projection, I think he has strong hands, good body control, but like I said, the ball skills, he lets so much come into his chest that he leaves a lot to be desired. But with his potential, he's a guy that, kind of like DJ Moore as far as his projection goes. If we're looking at that year 3 for him to break out, that's a guy who's a candidate to really do that because of his athleticism and his potential.
I'm starting to think about the prospects of maybe teaming up, Mason Rudolph with, his Oklahoma State teammate, James Washington from the Cowboys, and he's a good deep threat as well in the first round. Do you think Washington is a first-round receiver? Could the Bills maybe have a shot at him in the second? I'm trying to think, if they want Rudolph at, say, 22, would it be unreasonable for the Bills to maybe move back from 12? I mean, I'm trying to think now, maybe instead of moving up, they could maybe hop around in the first round, move back some spots, take Washington and Rudolph. Where do you expect Washington to go in this draft?
I think Washington will end up in the early second round.
Okay.
I don't think he'll end up in the first. I'm not a big fan of James Washington, and I have made that abundantly clear on my Twitter page, and I've caught a lot of backlash for that.
Right.
As far as Washington goes, I think he's a little stiff in his hips, and his route running is in question for me. As far as he can run a 9 route, he can run a post route, he can run a corner. I know he can do that, and I know that he's strong enough, and he has pretty good athleticism. I think he can jump high, and that shows up on film more than I'm looking at his vertical. That he can win as a deep threat, but I'm not sold that he can win on a dig or on a curl or a comeback because he's a little bit too stiff in the hips.
Okay.
And despite him having long arms and showing the ability to get off the line of scrimmage on film, he was doing it in the Big 12, which is not necessarily known for their best corner play. I'm a bigger fan of Marcel Aitman, who is the other Oklahoma State receiver. This is a guy who's like 6'4", 216. He is your typical possession receiver. He ran a 4.6, a little bit on the slower side, but that's kind of to be expected from a bigger receiver. I think that he has great ball skills, great body control. Multiple times on film on third down, Washington basically just floated balls up to Aitman and let him go get it. And I think that as a possession receiver on the outside, somewhat kind of like Kelvin Benjamin, if you're looking for another guy like that, Aitman will probably be your guy in this class. And if you want to look if you're going to pair one of the two receivers up as far as their value goes in the draft, you could probably get Aitman at pick 96.
Okay.
And then Washington would probably cost you a second rounder. I think the value-wise, you're going to get a better pick with Aitman.
A lot better value. Gotcha. Real quick before I let you go, Brad, the NFL proposed a rule change for the pass interference. The pass interference call where right now it's the spot of the foul. They proposed a 15-yard penalty instead. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. It looks like they're going to keep it the way it is. I'm curious to get your thoughts as a former wide receiver, what you think the rule should be in the NFL. Should it be, at the spot of the foul, or is a 15-yard penalty something you would have liked to see happen?
As a former receiver and current receivers coach, you would think that I would like the spot of the foul call, but I don't.
Yeah.
I think 15-yard penalty is the better way to go. I think it makes more sense than what they do in college and what they do in high school. Just because we've seen a few times, even if it's the last play of the half or last play of the game, or maybe it's late in the game, a team throws a deep ball, they get a pass interference call, and then suddenly they're on the 5-yard line with a chance to win the game. Uh-huh. I disagree with that. I would rather see it be a 15-yard penalty, and you go from there and a lot of times, the spot foul, it could be like a 40, 50-yard penalty when you throw it deep. And that's kind of ridiculous. That's the equivalent to having 5 holding calls is one long pass interference. I don't think that makes that much sense. I think it's more if it's a 15-yard penalty, it's still a huge advantage for the offense. And then within 15 yards, I think it could be a spot foul. And maybe if they're only 7 yards down the field, put it at the spot of the foul, automatic first down. But then you get, if it's further than 15 yards down the field, and then it's a 15-yard penalty. But I think doing anything more than 15 yards, I think is just too much of an advantage for the offense.
The only thing, and I feel that, the only thing I'm concerned about is, when Deshaun Jackson gets behind the defense and a corner trips him up, instead of a 70-yard touchdown, it's only a 15-yard penalty. That's my only thing about it is, if you were to make it 15 yards, I feel like maybe corners would use that against, faster receivers that just beat them.
I think that's fair. That does happen in college sometimes, especially with guys who are fast in college can expose, NCAA defensive backs a lot more.
Right.
But I think that if you're a receiver and you're going to create that vertical separation, you should learn how to avoid. You should learn how to move laterally. Use your hand. Have better hand usage.
That's a good point.
And just completely avoid the defensive back's hands and their ability to even hold you. I think that's an invaluable trait in the NFL, and I don't necessarily think that would happen too often. And even nowadays, when that happens, they're getting the ball at the offense will get the ball, inside the 20, and they'll probably score anyway. That's just my thoughts on the matter.
Brad Kelly, you can check him out on cover1.net. He's a receiver scout as well for Breaking Football. Follow him on Twitter at BradKelly17. Brad, thanks for coming on today. Enjoyed the insight. There's a nice change of pace not talking about quarterbacks as much because wide receiver is a big need for the Bills as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. Anytime you need to talk receivers, I'm more than happy to do it.
Sounds good. Brad Kelly of Cover One joining us. Thanks, Brad.